Good Tuesday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for April the 25th. Today, we're reading together in Numbers chapter 20, which is going to detail for us a few actually very important notes along the journey of some characters that we have seen throughout the Exodus story and that have even popped up recently and for various reasons. Miriam and Aaron are both going to exit stage left from the Exodus story, and we're going to be told the ending for Moses here within this chapter, as well as we see a continued unfortunate pattern of disbelief and disobedience from the people, even going to the highest degree of Moses and Aaron. So let's read about that here in Numbers chapter 20. Numbers chapter 20 and verse number 1. Numbers 20, verse number 1. Remember that we have turned back from the doorstep of the promised land, and they've been told that anyone 20 and up is not going to be able to enter into the promised land. They're going to enter into the wilderness, and they're going to wander until that generation is gone. And that's going to end up being about 40 years. And in fact, what's very interesting is that here, going from chapter 19 to chapter 20, we have a few decades that have passed. Some think between 38 and 40 years have passed between chapters 19 and 20 as far as just the chronology goes. And that ties into Numbers 33 and verse number 38, where we are given a recap of what takes place. And we're told that this chapter, which contains the death of Aaron, if all this is happening around the same time, then this would be long after what we saw as they failed to enter into the promised land. So with that in mind, and with many years of wandering having taken place, and just a lot of trouble for the people as a result of disobedience, we read about a little bit more of it here in Numbers chapter 20. Again, in verse number 1, the entire Israelite community entered the wilderness of Zin in the first month, and they settled in Kadesh. Miriam died and was buried there. And there was no water for the community, so they assembled against Moses and Aaron. Verse number 3. The people quarreled with Moses and said, "If only we had perished when our brothers perished before Yahweh. Why have you brought Yahweh's assembly into this wilderness for us and our livestock to die here? Why have you led us up from Egypt to bring us to this evil place? It's not a place of grains, figs, and vines, and pomegranates. There's no water to drink." Then Moses and Aaron went from the presence of the assembly to the doorway to the meeting. They fell face down, and the glory of Yahweh appeared to them. Yahweh spoke to Moses, "Take this staff and assemble the community. You and your brother Aaron are to speak to the rock while they watch, and it will yield its water. You will bring out water for them from the rock and provide drink for the community and the livestock." So Moses took the staff from Yahweh's presence, just as he had commanded him. Moses and Aaron summoned the assembly in front of the rock, and Moses said to them, "Listen, you rebels, must we bring water out of this rock for you?" Then Moses raised his hand and struck the rock twice with his staff, so that abundant water gushed out, and the community and their livestock drank. But Yahweh said to Moses and Aaron, "Because you did not trust me to demonstrate my holiness in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this assembly into the land I have given them. These are the waters of Meribah, where the Israelites quarreled with Yahweh, and he demonstrated his holiness to them." Moses sent messengers from Kadesh to the king of Edom. "This is what your brother Israel says. You know all the hardships that have overtaken us. Our ancestors went down to Egypt, and we lived in Egypt many years, but the Egyptians treated us and our ancestors badly. When we cried out to Yahweh, he heard our plea and sent an angel and brought us out of Egypt. Now look, we are in Kadesh, a city on the border of your territory. Please let us travel through your lands. We won't travel through any field or vineyard or drink any well water. We will travel the king's highway. We won't turn to the left or to the right. until we have traveled through your territory. But Edom answered him, you will not travel through our lands, or we will come out and confront you with the sword. We will go on the main road, the Israelites replied to them. And if we or our herds drink your water, we will pay its price. There will be no problem. Only let us travel through on foot. Yet Edom insisted, you may not travel through. And they came out to confront them with a large force of heavily armed people. Edom refused to allow Israel to travel through their territory, and Israel turned away from them. After they set out from Kadesh, the entire Israelite community came to Mount Hor. Yahweh said to Moses and Aaron at Mount Hor, on the border of the land of Edom, Aaron will be gathered to his people. He will not enter the land I have given the Israelites, because you both rebelled against my command at the waters of Meribah. Take Aaron and his son Eleazar and bring them up to Mount Hor. Remove Aaron's garment and put them on his son Eleazar. Aaron will be gathered to his people and die there. So Moses did as Yahweh commanded, and they climbed Mount Hor in the sight of the whole community. After Moses removed Aaron's garments and put them on his son Eleazar, Aaron died there on top of the mountain. When Moses and Eleazar came down from the mountain, then Moses and Aaron came down from the mountain, and when the whole community saw that Aaron had passed away, the entire house of Israel mourned for him 30 days. And that is Numbers chapter 20. Again, just the same old unfortunate issues continue to show themselves with the people concerning their what they perceived as being just horrible inconveniences and struggles. I mean, what they say in verse number 2, we're told in verse number 2, there was no water for the community, so they assembled against Moses and Aaron. Again, this is just rebellion once again, complaining. The people quarreled with Moses and said, if only we had perished when our brothers perished before Yahweh. Why have you brought Yahweh's assembly into this wilderness for us and our livestock to die here? Really? You think that your situation is so bad that it would be better for you to have perished before Yahweh, in whichever one of those instances that is referring to? You think it would have been better for you to do that than to be thirsty right now and think that you have no one at all to provide water for you? I mean, they think they would rather have died, or they would rather go out to Egypt, because obviously, this evil place, there's no grain, figs, vines, pomegranates, there's no water to drink. Oh, it's just everything's so terrible. Again, it just shows that whenever people become disgruntled, whenever they become discontented with their circumstances, they start saying really foolish things. They would rather have died before Yahweh than be in the situation they were in right now. Very, very interesting. So Moses and Aaron, they fall before Yahweh in the tent of meeting. The glory of Yahweh appears, and Yahweh spoke to Moses, take the staff and assemble the community, you and your brother Aaron, and speak to the rock. So speak to the rock, and while they watch, and it will yield its water, you will bring the water for them. They will be able to drink. Their livestock will be able to drink. Pretty simple commands here. But Moses, you can tell Moses is frustrated because he takes the staff from Yahweh's presence and he summons the assembly and he says, listen, you rebels. You rebels. I mean, it's not wrong. I mean, they are a very rebellious people. But unfortunately, we see that he will quickly be united with them in their rebellion. He says, must we bring water out of this rock for you? Well, what does Moses do next? Well, instead of speaking to the rock as he was told to, he strikes it twice, and water does fall from it. They are able to drink, but Yahweh is very displeased. He says to Moses and Aaron, because you did not trust me to demonstrate my holiness in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this assembly into the land I have given them. So these are the waters of Meribah. This is where they quarreled with the Lord. Remember, there's another place that was called the same thing, Meribah, because of previous quarreling with Yahweh. But notice what the issue is here. The issue here is verbatim, you did not trust me. Well, how did Moses and Aaron not trust Yahweh? Well, it seems that Moses is very frustrated, maybe even angry here. He doesn't believe what Yahweh says because he doesn't obey. Hold on to that thought. We'll come back to that in just a few moments. But notice the consequence. You will not bring this assembly into the land I've given them. Well, we should have already expected that, because Yahweh said chapters previously, after the spy incident or the scout incident where they did not enter into the land because of unbelief, that no one 20 years and up is going to enter in. They're going to die away in the wilderness. Seems to include, now looking at the big picture, Miriam, who we already saw her death at the beginning of the chapter, which, again, interesting that she's mentioned. Not just anybody's death is mentioned in the Bible. I think it shows her importance, her role in the story. But Moses, Aaron, you guys are not going to enter as well. And we see that at the end of the story. Skipping ahead, we'll come back to Edom in a moment. But skipping ahead, whenever they set out from Kadesh, they come to Mount Hor. Everybody does, and Yahweh says, hey, take Aaron up there. Moses, you need to take Aaron. You need to take his son Eleazar, and you need to go up there. And it's time for Aaron it's time for his part of the story to be done with. It's interesting that he says that Aaron will be gathered to his people and die there. But he's being punished by death. He's not able to enter into the land. But even with that reality, he's still going to be gathered to his people, which is language of life after death. And I think language of reward in a sense. So yes, Aaron might have failed in this moment, but the faith that he has exhibited as a high priest of Yahweh still allows him to experience reward in the afterlife. But considering him being the high priest, that's what's going on in this moment as well, that the garments for the high priest are being removed from removed from Aaron and put on Eleazar. So we have the passing of the high priesthood here as well. So Miriam and Aaron are both going to pass here in this chapter, and it's not going to be very long. Get to the end of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is just a series of many speeches that Moses played. Again, if I understand the chronology right here, and I'll just look here again, Numbers 33 and verse number 37, they traveled from Kadesh and camped at Mount Hor on the edge of the land of Edom. At Yahweh's command, the priest Aaron climbed Mount Hor and died there on the first day of the 5th month in the 40th year after the Israelites had went out of the land of Egypt. So if my chronology is right, they left Egypt, let's say Egypt's year 0. 2 years later, they have the opportunity to enter into the land. They don't. So it would be then 38 years after that, we see the death of Aaron. So we're looking here at 40 years after Egypt, about 38 years from what took place in Numbers chapter 13 and 14, if my chronology there is correct. I think that's how it reads here. So in all that time, for all that time previously, here Aaron has been serving as a high priest, but now it's time for that to be passed on to his son Eleazar, and he will serve in that position for some time. And then again, Deuteronomy takes place after this. Deuteronomy is a series of preaching that Moses does, basically preparing the people for the land. And after that, he too will pass. And the reason for that is because of the unbelief and disobedience to Yahweh. Again, I don't want to get ahead of myself. We'll talk about that in a minute. One more section in this chapter is verses 14 through 21, which might seem innocuous to us, except this would be a shorter journey to pass through Edom, would be a shorter journey of getting to where they were back to the promised land. What's interesting is that there's nothing that tells us here that the cloud went that direction. There's nothing here that tells us that Yahweh told them to go this direction. Maybe we can read into this, and I won't speak in absolute terms here, but possibly The issue here is that they are going away that Yahweh has not commanded them to go, which might be one of the reasons why the people of Edom, which we should know the backstory between Israel and Edom, Israel being the descendants of Jacob, Edom being the descendants of Esau. Obviously, there's some pretty bad history there between the two. And so Israel wanting to pass through Edom, Edomites say no. They try to negotiate with them. They say no. Try it. There's going to be issues. They try to negotiate and ends up sending the army and says, no, we're not going to do that. So again, it's just interesting here that Yahweh's not mentioned. This is a shorter journey. Maybe just wasn't for them to take this shorter journey. So they end up having to go the long way around. Now, getting back to this issue of, well, what did Moses do? Did Moses disbelieve? Did Moses disobey? And the answer is yes, that oftentimes disbelief is manifested in disobedience. I want to read real fast just from Hebrews chapter 3. Hebrews chapter 3, beginning of verse number 7, I believe it is. Hebrews 3, beginning of verse number 7. Therefore, as the Holy Spirit says, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts, as in the rebellion on the day of testing in the wilderness, where your fathers tested me, tried me, and saw my works for 40 years. Therefore, I was provoked to anger with that generation and said, they always go astray in their hearts, and they have not known my ways. So I swore in my anger, they will not enter my rest. Watch out, brothers and sisters, so that there won't be in any of you an evil, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God. But encourage each other today while it is still called today, so that none of you be hardened by sin's deception. For we have become participants in Christ if we hold firmly until the end the reality that we have had at the start. As it is said today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion. For who heard and rebelled? Wasn't it all who came out of Egypt under Moses? With whom was God angry for 40 years? Wasn't it those who sinned, whose bodies fell in the wilderness? And to whom did he swear that they would not enter his rest, if not those who disobeyed? So we see that they were unable to enter because of not disobedience, but it says unbelief. So here in Hebrews 3, there is a very clear equating of disbelief and disobedience. Whenever you don't believe God, you don't obey God. Whenever you don't obey God, that is a sign that you don't believe in God. Unfortunately, we see that here with Moses. Moses, for as much as we speak so highly of him for the role that he played in God's story, he's not a perfect man. Again, that's reserved only for Jesus. So we see here, even with this great example of Moses, that if we're not really minding our P's and Q's, if we're not really focused on what Yahweh says, we can find ourselves not believing in him, and that manifesting in a disobedience or in disobedience toward him. So may we focus on the reality of our belief being tied in with our obedience. We must obey God because we believe his commands. And if we believe his commands, we will follow him obediently. We will follow him faithfully. May we not suffer the same consequences as we see here, unfortunately, with Israel and also with Miriam. She had her issues in the past. Aaron has had his issues in the past. Here we see Moses exhibiting a moment of unbelief, and for that he is not going to enter into the promised land. We'll see that much further down the road after we have read through the rest of Numbers and into Deuteronomy as well. So remember, may our belief be manifested in our lives through our obedience to God. I appreciate so much you tuning in for this week and for this reading on this Tuesday. Hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday, and we'll be back at it again tomorrow. Let me double check to make sure we're going to be in chapter 20. Yep, tomorrow we will be 21. Tomorrow we will be reading from Numbers 21. Hope you can join in then. Take care and God bless.